And greetings, spring has sprung. I am Steve Deace. This has got to be the warmest I have ever remembered a Valentine's Day weekend. As I got out, I probably got about almost 20,000 steps in yesterday, man. I mean, I got out and got as absolute much sun as I possibly could. I'm feeling great. We were alongside Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre as well. We are brought to you by our friends over at BIRCH Gold. As uncertainty continues, the certainty of gold continues to rise. In fact, it has risen over 700% in just the last 20 years. If you want to take advantage of this, BIRCH Gold Group can be your guide. First, though, they want to give you that guide, and they'll give it to you for free. No obligation, just information. All right, get your free info kit on gold. Learn how you can convert an existing IRA into 401k or your 401k into an IRA in gold. Why gold has been used for centuries by smart investors as a hedge against government debasement schemes or times of uncertainty such as this. Get started today and find out why BIRCH Gold has an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers, a lot of them coming from right here in this audience, in fact. Text Steve to 989898. Again, that's text Steve to 989898 and get started today with BIRCH Gold by texting Steve at 989898. All right, coming up on today's show, we're going to preview our upcoming trip to Israel. We're going to find out what's happening on the ground there. What do they think of what's trending here in the U.S.? Is Trump going to bomb Iran while we're over there? And we're going to be left scurrying, trying to get back home. There's a non-zero chance of that. All right, so we're going to get into all of that with a gentleman I had the pleasure of meeting and connecting with at AmFest, and he's going to join us here at the bottom of the hour. Also, we've got two graphics we want to show you today to discuss the state of Christianity in America and the role that it is or isn't playing in our contemporary politics and what it means now for the future generations now that are emerging to take over, starting with us, the Gen Xers, then Aaron's, the Millennials, and then the Gen Zers behind us. So what's the state of play now as we are undergoing a massive generational shift in America? From a faith perspective, we'll take a look at that. And then we're going to talk to you, or we're going to talk with you and Joe Mitchell, who's a TPUSA endorsed Iowa congressional candidate. He'll be with us in the final segment of the show. But of course, before we get to all of that, we must first get to Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Breathe the Free Air Again, my friend. That was the gist of Secretary of State Marco Rubio's message to European leaders during the Munich Security Conference. Rubio delivered less a speech and more an attempted exorcism of an entire continent possessed by globalism.
For 5 centuries before the end of the Second World War, the West had been expanding. Its missionaries, its pilgrims, its soldiers, its explorers pouring out from its shores to cross oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. But in 1945, for the first time since the age of Columbus, it was contracting. Europe was in ruins. Half of it lived behind an iron curtain, and the rest looked like it would soon follow. The great Western empires had entered into terminal decline, accelerated by godless communist revolutions and by anti-colonial uprisings that would transform the world and drape the red hammer and sickle across vast swaths of the map in the years to come. Against that backdrop, then as now, many came to believe that the West's age of dominance had come to an end, and that our future was destined to be a faint and feeble echo of our past. But together, our predecessors recognized that decline was a choice, and it was a choice they refused to make. This is what we did together once before, and this is what President Trump and the United States want to do again now, together with you. And this is why we do not want our allies to be weak, because that makes us weaker. We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it. And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it. For we in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. We do not seek to separate, but to revitalize an old friendship and renew the greatest civilization in human history. What we want is a reinvigorated alliance that recognizes that what has ailed our societies is not just a set of bad policies, but a malaise of hopelessness and complacency. An alliance is the alliance that we want is one that is not paralyzed into inaction by fear. Fear of climate change, fear of war, fear of technology. Instead, we want an alliance that boldly races into the future. And the only fear we have is the fear of the shame of not leaving our nations prouder, stronger, and wealthier for our children. An alliance ready to defend our people, to safeguard our interests, and to preserve the freedom of action that allows us to shape our own destiny. Not one that exists to operate a global welfare state and atone for the purported sins of past generations. An alliance that does not allow its power to be outsourced, constrained, or subordinated to systems beyond its control. One that does not depend on others for the critical necessities of its national life. And one that does not maintain the polite pretense that our way of life is just one among many, and that asks for permission before it acts. And above all, an alliance based on the recognition that we, the West, have inherited together. What we have inherited together is something that is unique and distinctive and irreplaceable, because this, after all, is the very foundation of the transatlantic bond. We made these mistakes together, and now together we owe it to our people to face those facts and to move forward, to rebuild. Under President Trump, the United States of America will once again take on the task of renewal and restoration, driven by a vision of a future as proud, as sovereign, and as vital as our civilization's past. And while we are prepared, if necessary, to do this alone, it is our preference and it is our hope to do this together with you, our friends here in Europe. For the United States and Europe, we belong together. America was founded 250 years ago, but the roots began here on this continent long before. The men who settled and built the nation of my birth arrived on our shores carrying the memories and the traditions and the Christian faith of their ancestors as a sacred inheritance, an unbreakable link between the old world and the new. We are part of one civilization, Western civilization. We are bound to one another by the deepest bonds that nations could share, forged by centuries of shared history, Christian faith, culture, heritage, language, ancestry, and the sacrifices our forefathers made together for the common civilization to which we have fallen heir. And so this is why we Americans may sometimes come off as a little direct and urgent in our counsel. This is why President Trump demands seriousness and reciprocity from our friends here in Europe. The reason why, my friends, is because we care deeply. We care deeply about your future and ours. And if at times we disagree, our disagreements come from our profound sense of concern about a Europe with which we are connected, not just economically, not just militarily. We are connected spiritually, and we are connected culturally. We want Europe to be strong. We believe that Europe must survive, because the two great wars of the last century serve for us as history's constant reminder that ultimately our destiny is and will always be intertwined with yours. Because we know that the fate of Europe will never be irrelevant to our own.
Also at the Munich Security Conference, old Hillary Clinton says,
there is a legitimate reason to have a debate about things like migration, It went too far. It's been disruptive and destabilizing, and it needs to be fixed in a humane way.
And finally, death taxes, and AOC is still really dumb.
Rubio's speech was a pure appeal to Western culture. My favorite part was when he said that American cowboys came from Spain.
I thought they came from Winnetou, but
I believe the Mexicans and descendants of African enslaved peoples would like to have a word.
And that's what happened while we were away.
My gosh, she has a single-digit IQ. The Mexicans were sacrificing children before the Spaniards showed up there. Chica. Okay. Apocalypto was like a docudrama. That's what was going on there until the Spaniards showed up. Okay. They were eating the cats, eating the dogs, and throwing their kids into volcanoes before the Spaniards showed up. Aaron's montage brought to you by our friends over at Relief Factor. If you're struggling with too much chronic pain, probably because you have too much inflammation. Now, if you've got clinical pain, go see a medical professional with that. But if it's lifestyle related and it's that stiffness, achiness, soreness that kind of just lingers in your joints, your neck, your back, your knees, etc., and it just won't go away, well, there's a chance that, and a really good one, that Relief Factor will give you the relief you're looking for. Over the years, over 1 million people have tried the 3-week quick start. 70% of them saw such good results that they stuck with the product long term. Why don't you see? If you don't see a difference in your pain in 3 weeks or less, especially when it costs you just $20 to find out at relieffactor.com. Head over to relieffactor.com. Get the 3-week quick start today at relieffactor.com. So that's the second time now that I have watched some, if not all, of that speech that Rubio gave in Munich over the weekend. Watched the whole thing yesterday before I went to church, and that's when I pinged you guys about it in our group text and flagged it and said, hey, unless there's some more breaking news, I think that this should be the bulk of the Monday montage. And there's not really a ton of breaking news right now, so Aaron made the editorial decision to go ahead and make it the bulk of that montage. And here's a thought that I had watching it again. 8 minutes there of some of the finest weaving together of worldview and history and reality that we are probably capable of in our current spiritual environment as Westerners right there. That's just that's the grade Ralphie wanted on his paper, A++++. All right, that's what that was there by Secretary of State Rubio. Did you notice, though, that as he's laying all that out, there was only one line that received applause in that 8 minutes? Mm-hmm. Did you notice that? I mean, the first time I watched this, I was so intrigued by what he was saying from a worldview standpoint as it pertains to who we are or who we think we are or should be as Americans, right? That this time I was able to see it more from the other side of the equation. There was only one applause line, and it's when he said that our destinies are intertwined with Europe. Mm-hmm. That was the only one. Everything Marco Rubio says there would have been accepted understanding of history and political nomenclature, vernacular, common speak, regardless of who was in power. You would have heard 90% of that minimum from any U.S. administration post-World War II up until Obama. They would have said that pretty much verbatim. The Clinton administration, there might have been a little, 10% of progressive virtue signaling in there by the standards of that era, the 90s. But up until Obama, any U.S. administration would not have gone to Munich and given largely the exact same address.
Right.
And there would have been a lot more applause.
Yes, I think so.
One of the things I think you guys maybe have heard me say this on our show before, when people say, hey, I've got a family member and I'm losing him to the spirit of the age, or a kid and I'm losing him to the spirit of the age, or a friendship and I'm losing him to the spirit of the age. And one of the lines from Paul that we have discussed in our study of Romans is when it's at all possible, live at peace with everyone. And we have a tendency to, Paul speaks in qualifiers a lot, okay? Because he's a lawyer, he's a scribe, he's a theologian, and so he understands that nuance matters greatly. Well, Romans 13, Paul says, submit to the civil authorities. Well, that's not entirely what he said. He said to submit to the civil authorities with the honor that they are owed, and not to submit to them with the honor they are not. Paul did not say, live at peace with everyone. That's not what he said. What he said was, when it's at all possible to do so. And I think in the Christian worldview, we understand that our belief system is going to cause separation. Our Lord told us so. Do not think I came to bring peace but a sword. A man's own household will even stand against him. But the separation should mostly, not all the time, but most of the time when the worldview line of demarcation is drawn, if we do this whole thing right, most of the time, not all the time, most of the time, though, if we do this thing right of, number one, loving the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind, and then loving our neighbor as we love ourselves, right? Because God's heart and desire is for the uncircumcised pagan to come to repentance too, right? So when we do these things right, most of the time, not all, but most of the time, the lines will be drawn by the other side. They will be the ones that walk away. And you see this played out in the Gospels. How many times when people walk away from Christ, does he urge them to reconsider? Does he go after them and say, wait, I've got a whole new approach. Have you heard of the third way? Hold up. Let me make a call. I've got a slam and praise team here. We're going to modernize this sucker. And maybe, my approach just was wrong. How many times does that occur?
It doesn't.
It does not happen a single time. Not a single time. We have 4 Gospels, and not in a single one of them does Christ get people who are rejecting him to try to get them to reconsider their position once they consider that. Not a single time it occurs. And that's fascinating, too, because just as an aside, that is the total opposite impulse and instinct of how we've conducted church in the West for the last generation. The whole way we've conducted church in the West in the last generation is to appeal to the rejectors. Is to try to reconstruct how we do church, what we say in church, what we don't, all for the people who aren't here or may leave and never come back. Just in complete opposite of what the greatest evangelist of all time, Christ himself, did, but I digress. Okay, that's a topic for another day. But that's a model for when we're doing, who knows better what it means to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as you love yourself, than God himself in the flesh? Can we come up with a better model for what that looks like, do you think? No. And so on one hand, he is willing to die for his enemies all the way to the cross on one hand, right? But when they turn away from what he has to offer, he never chases after them to reconsider. You may love the lost. You will not love them as much as Christ. And Christ himself said to his disciples, hey, when the moment comes that it's very clear they've just tuned it out, move on, kick the dust off your sandals. And that's from the being that preached more on hell than anyone else in the entire Bible. That is important background for what I'm going to say here next. There's almost no one in that audience receptive to almost anything Marco Rubio said. They didn't make mistakes. This was all done on purpose. And Rubio is hinting at that when he uses the term, quote, managed decline. This is not ignorance or naivete. It is malevolence. But what that was a clinic in loving your neighbor as you love yourself. What you saw Senator Secretary Rubio do there is not give an inch at all. Nothing. Didn't give an inch at all of a first principle. Didn't offer up an alm or an olive branch on a first principle whatsoever. But then he offered up alms and olive branches on everything else. He was even, at times, self-deprecating and winsome as he said it. Ah, yes, Tim Keller from the grave would be proud. Rick Warren, shopping for another Hawaiian shirt, would love the dimpled winsomeness of Mr. Rubio. Yet how many times did they cheer Mr. Rubio's dimpled winsomeness? How many times? Only once. When he said what they think, and they applauded it from their own worldview. Yes, we are intertwined in a globalist manifestation, Council on Foreign Relations sort of way. That speech is not important for Europe. That speech is important for us.
Bingo.
It is important that we know that we have some leaders in this country who truly understand and can articulate what the stakes are that we're playing for here. And short of like literal biblical citations, I'm not sure it is possible just intending to do nothing more than lay out the geopolitical realities of how we got here, where we are, and where we need to go. I'm not sure it's possible to do it better than that speech without being like explicitly biblical worldview based like what we do. Just in terms of using human wisdom and understanding, obviously imbued with some level of Christian understanding and worldview, it's not possible to lay out the pieces on the chessboard better than that speech does. And so what we should take away from that speech, I believe, gentlemen, is that we do have an administration and a few people in that administration, even when, like right now, for example, the execution of said understanding is clunky. But that is an understanding of truly what is happening on the world stage, why it happened, and what needs to happen instead. That, the audience for that speech was maybe intended to be in that room, but I would say it's not really in that room. That needs to be in the living rooms of America. And the people who founded this country, one of which we're celebrating here on President's Day, they broke away from the European understanding and system of doing things to forge a constitutional republic when everybody else believed still in the divine rights of kings. And what they were able to do influenced that entire continent for the next century and a half. For this alliance to stand, we're going to have to do the same thing. But the most important thing is for us to stand and to understand what it is we stand on. And that was articulated beautifully there by Secretary Rubio. Gentlemen, your thoughts.
So to underscore your observation about which lines got the applause, or which line, singular, got the applause. Now, he did get a standing ovation at the end of this room full of European leaders. The man who came on the stage to lead the Q&A after this speech, to underscore your point, made the remark, boy, this is you could just hear the sigh of relief throughout the halls that the United States is reaffirming its support and its solidarity with Europe. The only thing I think the people in that room heard is a misperception of a few things that Marco Rubio said. And basically the way that they perceived it in that room, I'm convinced, is, yay, the United States gravy train continues. I think that's kind of maybe how they perceived it. I really appreciate what Secretary Rubio did. Much like Gandalf trying to free Theoden from the oppressive ideology of worm tongue, he did his best to say, breathe the free air again. Don't be afraid and ashamed of your own shadow. At the very least, at least we can say, we tried. Now, this is just a speech. And as you said, it illustrates that there are actors within our government who totally and completely, on a global scale, and I'm not saying that I mean literally a global scale, the inflection point that we are at in history. At the same time, we're going to likely have to go it alone, as Marco Rubio said. And it's good to know that somebody like him understands that crucial point.
Todd, what do you think?
I just Googled it to make sure the dates of it, but 20 years ago, a speech was given in Germany. Pope Benedict, Regensburg. Steve, I remember you commenting on it. It talked about the West and Islam. It's heartening to know that they're right in the same place. A message about who we are, and heartening, not in a good way, who we are and what we are forsaking. After 20 years, Rubio has got to step up to the mic and again say, is this thing on? Is anybody listening?
Mm-hmm.
And right, as Steve rightly said, this is not explicitly Christian, as the Pope would make it, or as Steve stressed, we make all the time on this show. But it nonetheless begs the question, what are you prepared to believe, Dr. Jones? And if the hour was late in 2006, it's all the later here in 2026. Has things gotten any better in Europe vis-a-vis Islam in the last 20 years? No. Marco Rubio is very polite and very kind. And you should look at what he did as an intervention. And
That's a great description.
And you should look at it as possibly a goodbye.
2-minute warning, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not moving. You guys are leaving. We're holding on to the ground of previous generations. You guys are leaving. We're not going anywhere. Just so you know, you made that decision to leave on your own.
And because that's so sobering, we used to, Steve, I know you were, I think I was in 7th grade, Challenger disaster, and to roll in the TV, from the everybody watch kind of things like that. This is here because this is about us. Everybody get out your iPads or whatever the kids are doing these days. Everybody in our public schools should be watching this speech. You think that's happening? Uh-oh. See, that's how the late is. It is about us because we're also coasting on fumes. And it's saying goodbye to them does us no good if we say, finally, hello to ourselves in a way that is good, that is true, and that is beautiful, and that is not constantly distracted and excuse-making and comfortable. But I thank Marco Rubio for the attempt. And once again, say what you want about Donald Trump. Certainly in the last couple of months, we've said it on the show about certain frustrations we have. But even if this is just his, let's all just get together and be groovy once again. Why is a guy like Donald Trump the one who's got to keep coming to the table on this if everybody else in the West is so much smarter and better?
I think what's more important than noting how few applause lines there were in that speech, despite how insightful and maybe borderline prophetic it was at times, is if you really want to see how late the hour is, look and see which, if any, of your favorite conservative or alternative media personalities, platforms, discussed this today. It's not like, other than the ongoing Epstein debacle, which that story was a story the day before and the day before, that'll be another one tomorrow, right? Yes. Okay. There's nothing else pressing right here at this moment, right now. Okay. And be more concerned about the lack of people maybe wearing their own jersey who understand the lateness of the hour and highlight what Rubio has to say here than a Europe that is largely already gone, especially the old Western side of the continent. More in a moment.
The Steve Deace Show.
Well, we are 6 days away from taking our show on the road. We're going to Israel for the very first time, and going to be spending a week out there next week, and filming a ton of content for a 3-part series that we plan on running later this year after the election. And I'm gonna tell you right now, I am taking my rolling power mini massager from Chirp with me. It's like my American Express card now. I never leave home without it. And these kinds of things, these kinds of devices, folks, they are key, particularly as we get older. If we want to stay active, right? Want to help avoid injury, right? I mean, these kinds of devices are key when it comes to our preventative health. And that's why you want to go with our friends over at Chirp, because they have proven FDA-cleared devices. Almost every product is FSA or HSA eligible, which makes relief more affordable and accessible than ever before. You can also get the decompression massage table by Chirp called the Contour. That is a fantastic device as well. All kinds of other things like trigger point rollers. They've got a ton of those. That is something a lot of you, maybe that was your New Year's resolution, to lose weight, get healthy, and now you're at that stage where your body is starting to say, are you sure about this? We've got some owies. Those trigger point rollers, man, there's a reason why you see those, the people that work their bodies professionally are at a way higher end at the gym than you and I can. Do what they do. And there's a reason why you see them using those things before they work out. They absolutely make a huge difference. All right, so check out the full catalog our friends at Chirp have, like Birdie Chirp, CHIRP. Go to gochirp.com/Steve. That's gochirp.com/Steve. Do yourself a favor. Go to gochirp.com/Steve. Well, I had a pleasure to meet our first guest here today about 2 months ago at AmFest. Pesach Wolicki is here with us. He is an opinion writer for both the Jerusalem Post, Israel 365. He's over on Real America's Voice as well. So we thought, what perfect time to pick his brain than right now, since we are getting prepped to take a trip to Israel as a show as we speak. So, my friend, it's good to connect with you again. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm actually in Nashville right now. I'm going to be attending the National Religious Broadcasters Convention. I do a lot of Jewish-Christian relations work, so we're here to hang out with our Christian brothers and sisters.
So right now, I know your most recent piece, or one of your most recent pieces for the Jerusalem Post, was kind of analyzing the way Trump, this kind of dance that Trump is doing with Iran. Well, I want him to make a deal, but do I really want him to make a deal, right? And I was just telling our team, listen, man, I mean, I think we have one of our aircraft carriers not within striking distance of Iran as we speak. There's a non-zero chance, all right, that Daddy may take his belt off on the Ayatollahs while we're over in Israel. Okay, so what is that chance, do you think? I know that the president just said that he's given him about a 30-day deadline about a week ago, and I do not apologize for the very first question here being entirely self-serving, Pesach. So you tell us, what are the chances?
Well, first of all, if something happens while you're in Israel, trust me, Israel is a lot safer than you realize. It's certainly much safer than a lot of American cities are. So you'll be just fine. And, I'll be happy to, help you find a safe place to be if something happens while you're there. You'll actually, you'll experience firsthand the resilience and the joy that the Israeli people have, even as we go through.
We'll get the true, authentic experience, right? Is that what you're saying? What it really means to be in Israel on a daily basis?
Eastern treatment,
yes,
Steve.
all right, yes.
But in terms of what you said about Trump, about the chances of attack, it's not just one aircraft carrier. There's a second one. The Bush is on its way over there now. The amount of military assets that are being amassed there are quite significant, and notably, the U.S. has been installing a THAAD anti-aircraft and anti-ballistic missile defenses right around its bases all over the Middle East. So it really seems that this is not just flexing muscles and talking trash. There really seems to be a lot of planning for kinetic action against the Iranian regime. What's more, after President Trump said to the Iranian people, help is on the way, and that encouraged them to go out into the streets in much greater numbers, it is without question, and I'm not saying this as an indictment of him, but without question, had Trump not said that, far less Iranians would have been killed. We know this because of the way past rounds of protests. Every few years, mass protests in Iran flare up, a few people get killed, and it all dies down pretty quickly. And we saw massive numbers of people being slaughtered by the regime, and they were emboldened. They were emboldened by what President Trump said. I personally, and through channels I have in Israel, monitor very closely what happens in Iranian social media that leaks out, and there's kind of a feeling of possibly being betrayed by Trump if the regime is not attacked at this point. So I think the chances of kinetic action are very high. If Trump goes down in history as having thrown a lifeline to the regime by cutting some sort of deal where they get to keep their heads down until he leaves office and then they're still in power, it's not going to do well for his legacy. So I think the chances of kinetic action are actually much higher than people think.
Let's say this occurs. This is what we discussed on our show quite prevalently when those demonstrations were at their halcyon and all over social media, right? And what we speculated was if there was somebody that we thought could rule and subdue that nation with that power vacuum, chances are help would have been on the way. But maybe that's where there is real doubt, is what takes the place of the Ayatollahs, right? And that's my question to you then. What takes the place? What's prepared to lead and govern that country and not have it, for example, I mean, as you know, we got ISIS because they thought that, Al-Qaeda wasn't radical enough, okay? So what's to stop that place from splintering, from it becoming a beachhead for, now we get an even more radicalized state because someone cannot unite the people and govern them. What takes the place there?
Okay, there's a lot of questions in your question, but let's start with the fact that with one of the last things you said, what prevents this from becoming more radicalized? So I'm not going to play prophecy, and I can't tell you who exactly would replace the regime if and when it falls, but let's just educate your audience. Iran is very different than every other Muslim country in the Middle East in a number of important ways. First of all, the Iranian people are not that Muslim. Iran has the lowest rate of mosque attendance of any officially Muslim country. And also, it is not an Arab country.
Right.
And without, I don't know. I know I can be pretty politically incorrect on your show, but let me just say it this way. The Iranians are Persians. That's very different culturally than Arabs. They are highly educated. They're very secular. They're very pro-Western. This is not Libya or Iraq or Syria, that if the regime, which is one little mafia family, gets removed, then it splinters into a bunch of jihadist groups in their pajamas and sandals running around with AK-47s. That is not the situation in Iran. We're talking about, again, a very educated, fairly westernized country. If you think back before 1979, before the revolution, this was a very cosmopolitan, pro-Western, highly educated population. And they're very pro-democratic, meaning the people, let's put it this way, the people in the streets for the Arab Spring in places like Libya and Egypt and Syria going back to that time were Islamists. The people in the streets of Tehran are secular pro-Western. Okay? Mm-hmm. It's a very different type of country. You don't have all sorts of jihadist militias in the hinterlands of Iran the way you have that in other Middle Eastern countries. So there could certainly be chaos if and when the regime falls, but not all regime changes are the same. So I actually have a lot of hope that if and when the regime falls, that it will be replaced by something that is pro-Western, because again, that's where the population is. What I think is most likely to happen is that a lot of the people running the show will remain in power, and that some second or third level bureaucrats will overthrow the top mullahs, because secretly a lot of them are actually quite secular. So exactly what the regime change will look like, I don't know. And it's not the responsibility of the West, of the Americans, of the Israelis to figure out the regime change, because regime change can only happen from within. Even all the bombing America will do cannot bring down the regime. They can create the conditions where the regime is so weak that the people then rise up and bring it down. But what that looks like is not going to be the responsibility of the West, going in there. But again, there's really no chance of a kind of splintering like you're picturing in other Middle Eastern countries. Again, there will be chaos. Let me just also add, Steve, this is a very important point. In Muslim culture and in other Middle Eastern cultures that are sort of, quasi-Muslim even, 40 days after death is the end of the official first stage of the mourning period. And traditionally, with political deaths, on the 40-day mark after the death, there is a kind of, it's almost like a second funeral. And in the Masa Amini protests in 2022, when that young girl who wasn't wearing a hijab was taken into custody and then killed in custody, which led to widespread, that was the last mass protests in Iran, they broke out in a mass way on the 40th day after she was killed. The 40-day mark after January 8th and 9th, when the lion's share of the slaughter of Iranian civilians took place, is coming tomorrow and the next day. And they've already called those who led these protests. These protests were started by the bazaar shop owners, who really were the engine that drove this whole round of protests that we're still in the aftermath of. They've called for a national strike tomorrow and the next day, and for people to come out into the streets on Thursday. And we could be seeing another round of this with people pouring out into the streets, and then the Iranian regime will, even more under the microscope of Trump and his people, be really put to the test of whether or not they open fire on their people again. So we're actually in the calm before the storm in a number of different ways.
Let's test your analysis and retcon it in the opposite direction then. How has the Iranian regime then been able to hold on to power for as long as it has?
Well, it's a very sophisticated regime, and it partially has to do with the culture that I just mentioned. If it was ruling over a whole bunch of Sunni militias like the Afghanistan or Iraqi population, it might have been toppled from within. But the Persian people are actually a pretty peaceful, docile people. And they don't have weapons. There's a very strong surveillance state, a very strong alliance with the Chinese who help them with their surveillance state. How have they stayed in power a long time? When they start killing people, everyone runs back into their homes, which is what we saw. This has happened repeatedly over the years, and they still have cash because they sell their oil to the Chinese Communist Party. 90% of the oil that this oil-rich nation produces is sold to the Chinese Communist Party, providing them a financial engine that allows them to keep going. How have they been able to hold on so long? Again, it's a brutal regime. There are brutal regimes that hang on a very long time. We see it. The Soviet Union lasted a long time. North Korea is lasting a long time. But the Iranian regime is weaker right now than it's ever been.
Is there anybody in the IRG there, the military structure? Is there an al-Sisi level figure there that I guess maybe we'll describe as pragmatically cooperative at times, right? Because you've told us the citizenry is unarmed, and yet there's a massive military presence there within that Iranian army there, right? Okay. I can't imagine all their military leaders are going to be like, Viva la Revolution and democracy arrives, right? They're the ones sitting on the guns. Human nature is everywhere as well as I do, right? They're going to want to have a say in what happens next. So is there an al-Sisi-like pragmatically cooperative figure within that military regime that could be propped up potentially?
Okay, I'm gonna answer your question by giving you a lay of the land of how the Iranian military is structured. There are actually two armies. Okay, there's the Iranian army, and then there's the IRGC. The IRGC is not the Iranian army; it's the regime army.
Right.
So there's actually two armies in Iran. One of them serves the regime, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. And then there's the Iranian military. The Iranian military is really not participating in the suppression of the people. In fact, when the supreme leader at the beginning of this called on the Iranian army to step in and suppress the riots, they kind of held back, and they're kind of sitting it out. It's the IRGC that is suppressing the people, and the IRGC itself has within it Iranians who are part of the regime, but it also has a lot of imported jihadists who are Arabs from other Shiite militias in the area. And that's who's been doing the killing of the Iranian people in the streets, because the actual Persians who are in the IRGC have refused orders. to fire on their people. And the regime also realizes that telling people to shoot their own cousins is a bad idea. So a lot of the killings being carried out by non-Iranians who are kind of hired guns in the IRGC. This is all a way of answering your question, in that when the time comes, there are enough moderates and anti-regime people in the military that they will topple the regime. That's probably what's going to happen.
Final question. We got about a minute here. 1 year from now, is the current Iranian regime in place, do you think?
You know, it's up to the Iranian people. Again, America, here's my worst case scenario. America bombs them and bombs them and bombs them. They keep their head down. They suffer the blows. They fire ballistic missiles in all directions. And if they manage to kill a few Americans on any base in the Middle East, even if it's 1 or 2 or 3 Americans, a lot of our friends on the right, a lot of people in our camp, in the America First camp, are going to be clamoring for Trump to stop this whole thing and get out of there because Americans are dying. And as long as America stops short before the regime falls, they could reconstitute themselves, keep their head down until Trump's out of office, and then all bets are off. So I'm not willing to say that the Iranian regime is going to be gone in a year from now. Until it falls, it's there.
Pesach, where can people find your work, brother? That was great stuff.
Thank you very much. So I'm with Israel 365 Action. You can find on our YouTube channel at Israel 365 News. I put up explanatory videos about the Middle East 3 times a week. I'm also on X at Rabbi PW, and I have an author page at the Jerusalem Post, Israel's major English language daily.
Really, that was really great analysis, man. Appreciate you. Thank you. We'll do it again.
Thank you. God bless, and I look forward to seeing you in Israel.
You bet. Thank you. All right, gentlemen, your thoughts on that conversation. I thought we got some nuance there that at least I was not previously aware of, at least to some of that. What do you think?
Well, he has an opinion that's very personal to him about the way he would like things to go, but he pulled a Steve Deace there, and there's what I want to happen, what I think will happen, and that's very, very important and sober-minded. And he didn't give you any easy answer. Ultimately, at the end of the day, when it comes to freedom, it's who wants it. Steve, your adage all the time, political will. Mm-hmm. And it's going to come with loss of blood and treasure. I don't think there's any way around it, but we're living at a linchpin of history here, apparently.
Yeah, 2 things stuck out to me and things that I've been trying to mull over as we're thinking about this issue. Who are the Iranians? Are they Islamists or are they largely just Persians? Mm-hmm. That's an important thing to factor into your analysis of this conversation as well. And then the thing about the 2 different armies that they have, mm-hmm. that they possess, that's also crucially important into this analysis. So the bottom line is, as he ended with, it's going to be up to the people themselves.
We'll come back. We'll look at a couple of trend charts from over the weekend and what they may or may not say about the future of the country next. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. With Aaron McIntyre and Todd Erzen, I am Steve Deace, and you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Take advantage of that by emailing the show, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube. And then if you wouldn't mind, please, if you love the podcast version, thank you. You're the biggest part of our audience. Leave us a 5-star review, as tens of thousands of your fellow listeners already have on the podcast platform of your choice. And then you can also on that podcast platform hit subscribe, or if you're on Apple iTunes, follow, to ensure that every time we do a new episode, it is right there dropping conveniently in your podcast feed. And many more of you have done that. So thank you for each and every one of those. And thanks to our friends over at Beam Dream Powder. Their Dream Powder is made with a powerful blend of all natural ingredients like reishi, magnesium, melatonin, and more to make sure you get the absolute best night's sleep you can. And also from a company that shares the same America First values that you do as well. It's designed to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and that helps you to wake up feeling amazing. I've tried it. It tastes good. It's got lots of different flavors. It's not loaded with carbs and sugar, right? And I when Beam came on about the middle of last year, that's the first time when I tried Beam, that was the first time I was sleeping through the night without having to get up to pee twice. All right, so that just goes to show you how deep of a sleep you'll get yourself into. So if you've been waiting for the right time to try it, this is it. They're offering you guys an exclusive discount. We go to Shop Beam, B-E-A-M as in Mary, like a shop, like laser beam. Shopbeam.com/Steve. Use the code Steve. You'll get up to 40% off with my discount code Steve at shopbeam.com/Steve. Try the best-selling Dream Powder for just $39 for that discount. So it comes out to about $1.25 a night. Would you pay $1.25 for a great night's sleep a night? I know you would. Shopbeam.com/Steve, code Steve. Shopbeam.com/Steve, code Steve. Well, there were a couple of charts that emerged over the weekend with trend lines that I think we need to take some time to discuss. At the bottom of the hour, Joe Mitchell's going to join us. He's running for Congress here in our state of Iowa. He ends up being, because of Charlie's sad assassination, the only candidate for office in Iowa that Charlie has ever endorsed. He's TPUSA endorsed, and he's going to join us here at the bottom of the hour. Before we get there, though, I want us to take some time and look at a couple of these charts that emerged over the weekend and kind of have an idea of what they may or may not say about where we currently are as a country, where the state of the church in the country, and then what this means now is we're undergoing a generational transition. And boomers are, running into father time. We're going to be the next generation, Todd, that'll learn that father time is undefeated because we're next up. All right. And then behind us is Aaron's generation and Gen Z. So these three generations are now emerging to take over leadership. I saw our good friend Tim Young was urging during the last break, why do we even need to have a primary in 28? Why don't we just name the ticket to be Vance and Rubio and just move on and not waste everybody's time and money? That was his take, right? Okay. I don't think I'm allowed to have that take because I live in Iowa and I may get kicked out of the state if I say let's not have a caucus. All right, but I'm bringing that up because it fits into this conversation that what Tim is pointing out is we're going to go from maybe the last boomer president now, he's on the right in Donald Trump, to a ticket of a Gen Xer and a millennial, right? Vance and Rubio, right? So we're undergoing this generational shift in America here. So what's the lay of the land? All right. I saw that this was shared by our great and dear friend Megan Basham. This question: would you perform the wedding of a homosexual couple if your religious group allowed it? See, I want us to discuss the making of that question too, the way that question is worded. If your religious group allowed it, all right? 46% of Catholic clergy said no, they would not. 80% of evangelical clergy said they would not, even if their church allowed it. 70% of black Protestants said they would not, and you're learning a little bit of why Pete Buttigieg has exactly 0 black vote support in all the polls. 23% of mainline Protestant clergy said they would not. And definitely not, I should say, 23% of non-Christian clergy, so that would be Jew, Muslim, Hindu, etc., said that they would not. When you throw in the probably nots, 56% of Catholic clergy said they would disobey the church, which if we'll get into with Todd, I'm sure, so you guys understand better if you're evangelicals like us. Disobeying ecclesiastical authority is a big deal in Christianity historically, regardless. It's an even bigger deal for Catholics, right? So even with the current state of the priesthood, a majority of priests said they would probably not or definitely would not marry homosexuals, even if the church sanctioned it. It's about 89% now, well, when you throw in the probably nots on the evangelical side. 84% among black Protestant clergy, when you throw in the probably not. It jumps to 30% among the mainline. I have to be honest with you, that number was higher than I expected it to be. And then it remains at 23%. But you can see here, the less religious you are, the more willing you are to do this. because someone will always rule and something must always be worshipped. So the less you are detached from the traditions of your religion, the more you will attach to the spirit of the age religion. All right. And so mainliners, probably yes, definitely yes. They are, mainline Protestantism is all but lost to the spirit of the age, which is why I thought the numbers of people who wouldn't do it were higher than what I expected. And that comes out to 63% said that they would if the church would sanction it. 72%, that's like maybe another 1% there in the probably yes. So we'll call it 73% of non-Christian religious clergy said that they would. All right. So gentlemen, let's start here. This chart, the results, but also the way the question is posed. Your reactions. What do you think it means?
Well, if you combine, is it expressly labeled evangelicals? Is that that bar?
Yes.
If you combine evangelicals and mainlines, just looking at the red lines, you get an average there that is roughly Catholic. I think that's, if you just do a straight up Catholic versus Protestant, I mean, that's the thing. There's traditional Catholic, trad Catholics, whatever you want to call them. And then there are, a lot of liberal hippie Catholics. We're going to get onto the other graph, which will play out. And that's the important point. Both of these graphs are connected from a Catholic point of view. Secondly, from a Catholic perspective and how this would be answered, I read an interesting commentary on this, and it's at least a question that you have to bring up because, Catholicism has existed for 2,000 years now and hasn't changed its teaching on this, even with somebody, but Pope Francis said very clear-minded things about this sort of thing. But it begs I think it might have been like a philosophical, and therefore, if we take it too far, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, and it's to your point exactly, Steve, which is why you were generous to bring it up, about authority.
Mm-hmm.
If there's gray areas within teaching, it's not this specific teaching, but this is just teaching in general. If the magisterium tells you to follow, it is your duty as a Catholic to follow. So I don't know if some people answer this when you get into those kind of sort of blocks in there, if they kind of looked at it that way, more as an authority question as opposed to the specifics of gay marriage. So those are my two initial thoughts on it.
I think that is a very important distinction for Protestants to understand. Make sure I don't put words in your mouth. What you're saying is there's a percentage of Catholic clergy who would do this. You think there's a non-insignificant percentage of the Catholic clergy who said they would do it, who would do it only because the church told them. And so they would bind their own conscience to that in a way.
I don't know if the flat out I would do it, but in those margins of I might do it or something like that,
yeah.
I think they might have chosen that because I'm balancing two things, the specifics of marriage and my need to follow the authority of the church. And so, but I think...
guys, like what I've done with Romans 13, where we taught this on the show, all right? Yes, you submit to the civil authority until they claim and honor that they are not owed, right?
Right.
Are those kinds of distinctions inherent to the average Catholic believer? Are they given in this age? Are they given grounds for, the devil gains a foothold over some segment of leadership here and decides, hey,
absolutely
there is an appeal to
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So there is a distinction and there's an off-ramp, basically, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, and this doesn't even bring, I'm trying to be as open-ended as possible, but this doesn't even bring up the distinction between teachings that are ex cathedra versus not. I mean, this isn't an impossibility from a Catholic perspective. This can never happen. The Pope can never teach that gay marriage is okay.
When you say can never happen, define the context of that. Like it can't be permitted to happen, or it would like literally never happen. Like it goes against it'd be like going against gravity. Like it morally shouldn't be permitted to happen, or it could not like scientifically happen.
Yes, but both. I mean, basically, we're talking about if something like this would be proclaimed, you're welcome to start talking about the Antichrist.
Okay. And your argument for that would be what you said at the top, I'm guessing. Hey, we have largely been the ones pushing back against this for, this on this stuff for 1,000 years before there was a Reformation, which just goes to show with all the various ups and downs of the various popes and the eras that you guys always like to point out when things weren't always at their best, we still held the line on that kind of stuff. It's kind of like a supernatural confirmation of your thesis.
Yes.
Is that what you would go with? I think that's all perfectly fair from your perspective. The only thing I'd push back on, I don't know if Aaron, you think it's a fair pushback. I don't think evangelicals want to be linked in any way, shape, or form with mainline Protestants, like at all. Like I think they view that as like not even. I mean, I don't know what you think, but in our circles, maybe there's a generational thing. I don't know, Aaron, but in our circles that I run in, mainline Protestantism. This is why I was amazed the number went out of almost 4. Because we don't view mainline Protestants the way you would view Jesuits, for example, a wayward sect.
Somebody
we view it as just literally straight up demonically conquered church.
Just over the weekend, somebody told me that somebody else was going to a Presbyterian church, and I said, "What kind of Presbyterian?"
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So like we would not look at most of those old mainline denominations as like Jesuits. We would look at them as Jesus came and took away his lampstand, forsaken, is how we would kind of look at them. Aaron, what stands out to you about this graph?
2 things, one leads to the other. First, this. You'll notice, isn't it interesting? The non-Christian clergy are far more sure about what they believe and what they would do than those who claim the name of Christ.
In both directions.
In both directions, yeah. Look how there's not even a sliver of probably not.
Yeah.
There's scant probably yes, and then there's a scant percentage of not sure. Isn't that interesting? So I think that leads to my second thing kind of indirectly. I think overall, the question that was asked is okay to get a baseline of where people are, where clergy are in the abstract. However, I would like to know if the same variety of question was asked, and it was asked, hey, if Joe and Tim walk into your church and your religious group allowed it, would you marry them? Or if Joe and Tim walk into your church, would you marry them? I would like to know the answer to that question after seeing the baseline in the abstract that we just saw here.
Who is the famous evangelical minister? Was it just last year? I think he's Scottish or Irish, was asked the question.
Yeah.
Alistair Begg.
Yeah.
That's right. What was the question you remember? Was it, would you attend a trans wedding or something? Is that what it was?
He was sent an email from an older lady who I think daughter or something like that had fallen into transgenderism. And Alistair explained that in this specific circumstance, it would not be a problem, I think, to send a gift or attend the wedding, as long as that individual knows where you stand on this.
That's what it was. It was back in 24.
And I want to be fair to him because the overall propensity of his ministry has been very strong.
Oh, it's been that's what if it had not, this would not have made the news that it made. I mean, having Alistair Begg say, "Hey, send a wedding gift to your grandkid who's marrying a trans nutter." I mean, that's the equivalent of, turning on the TV and having John Wayne say, "Have you thought about putting a hyphen in front of your name?" I mean, you're like, what planet is this? Because it just doesn't line up with everything else that the man had set up until that point. But that you made me think of that with your question, right? That's where things get real practical real quick, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. I had not considered the first point you made at all. That the non-Christian in both directions, the conviction is way stronger than it is amongst those claiming the mantle of Christ.
That's a Pandora's box right there.
Yes, yeah, it is. Because a lot of that conviction in the direction we would like could be from a wrong premise, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah, like the Islamic one, for example. Yeah. All right, graphic number 2. All right, and then we're going to discuss what we think this means about where we are moving forward as we represent the future generations now about to assume the mantle of leadership here. So, Todd, I saw this, man, and I thought of you right away. Because, how many times have you said something about this on our show about a member of your diocese that you're friends with who just said, a deacon, who just said, listen, my generation of the diocese just basically has to die off.
Yeah.
It's a lost generation, right? And holy cow, brother, this is quantified in this exact graphic. Wow. All right. Look at this. If the Catholic Church permitted it, would Catholic priests perform weddings for homosexuals? Among those born before 1950, so most likely to be boomers, 61% lean yes. Among those born in 1970 or later, so Gen Xers, Millennials, Gen Zers, only 19% lean yes. That's incredible. That is That number even had to surprise you a little bit. You even had to be like, holy crap, that guy was even more right than I thought.
Yeah.
Because this is one of the most stunning generational lines of demarcation in our direction. I've seen some stunning ones going against us, okay?
Yeah.
All right? But going in our direction, this is one of the most stunning ones I have ever seen. Because the ones born after 1970 or later, we're all the ones that were worked over completely by the sexual revolution, by the rainbow jihad, by efforts like After the Ball. And so maybe seeing the excesses of those things, we're like, yeah, that's going to be a no from me, dog. But even that, that is what, an 80% swing, okay, in a trend line on a singular issue generationally. Wow.
Yeah, which is... Listen, and it does tie into the previous graph, what I was saying about authority. Here's what you have to understand. There's never been a Catholic, and I mean never, a Catholic gay wedding. All of the so-called...
No, but you can call it whatever you want, but that's not what it is.
And because by definition, and there are, aggrieved nuns who now say I'm a priest, and they first rejected the authority of the church, and then they start doing things like gay weddings. But guess what those people are called? And this is a philosophical discussion. I'm not casting slings and arrows. They're called Protestants. Okay? They gave up on the authority, historical authority of the Catholic Church. Now that's the thing. I understand, and I will defend my evangelical friends, the two in this room and everybody online too, when they're like, yeah, the main lines, those are not. But this is the game. People protest for various reasons, all right? And everybody started off with sola scriptura, and it just ends up going in a lot of directions. And the ones that are now mainline, by the way, mainlines are very generic, easy to cast aspersions. Guess what they're still called? Lutheran. That's kind of a big guy, isn't he, in the whole story of Protestantism? So, yes, going back, it's not just a generation that happens to be alive now. And one guy came at me, totally not, maybe doesn't under the context of the show, and he's not even a priest, but he thought like, you want me to die? How dare you? No, that's not what I'm talking about. But this is a uniquely sinful generation in the history of man. That's how profound.
There's no question about
what we're talking about it.
There's no question about that. Guys, do you know that every dispensationalist boomer in this audience, this has been like their favorite 15 minutes we have done in a minute. All right? They're just checking box at this point. All right? Laodicean age of the church, box checked, box checked, box checked. Okay? All right? Because you're right. When you look at, we have had issues with grooming, or with the old world called pederasty, homosexuality, lasciviousness. Dude, ancient Egyptians were drawing pornographic hieroglyphics in caves, okay? But we've never had this level of debauchery filtered down into the common populace like we do right now. A lot of times it was really the elites who had the time on their hands, the life expectancy, and the resources by which to get bored and try to dull their senses and find new ways to, create dopamine hits before they knew what a dopamine was, right? That's what's different, is how filtered down into the water table this is, and what you are able to just access in the next 5 minutes with one of these devices, which virtually every sentient being okay, who's above, including most who are even below the poverty line in the West have, okay? You're right. That is absolutely unique to human history. There's never been this level of debased morality that is filtered as far down into the gen pop as we've seen in human history, except for maybe, the antediluvian era of the age of Noah, all right? It's probably since then. And again, every boomer dispensationalist is nodding their head with me right now saying, told ya! All right, but anyway, finish your point.
But also a lot of young Catholics are nodding with me that if we can survive, this 40 years in the desert, which is that's roughly the length of of a generation in anywhere between 25 and 40, depending on where you're in history. But where we talked about the fourth turning, if we can get outside of this cycle, what's waiting on the other end is Steve, what's one of the main themes, if not the main theme on this show? Revival or bust. Well, that's what's apparently waiting on the other side of this for Catholics.
Aaron?
I don't have too much more to add, but I would say it would be fascinating to test your often cited axiom that the church is going to have to shrink before it can grow again. It would be fascinating to cross-reference. So this is, I believe, American data. Cross-reference the per capita Catholic population in each of these three areas versus what you see here with the data. See what that actually turns out with. See if those in the era 1970 or later, the average per capita Catholic population, is that smaller than the average per capita Catholic population from 50 to 69? I think that would be a fascinating test of your axiom.
That would be fascinating. Would there be a bifurcation there, do you think, Todd, among the general population? Would they be more inclined to be worked over by this in generations that were in the priesthood, or not? What do you think? I mean, you've been to more masses recently than Aaron and I have been combined ever. So what do you think? Just, going into church.
Well, there's paradoxical thinking about this, because it would, and there's obviously Holy Spirit power going on, because the generation that is the most lost there is the one that raised the ones that are rejecting that lostness. So I don't know if I can make a blanket assertion about that.
So what's the lay of the land based on these two charts? As our generation, and so for you and I, that's Gen X. For Aaron, our generation for you is millennials, and then the Gen Zers as well. As now we get set to move into positions of prominence and leadership in this culture, what do these charts tell us about the lay of the land, the impact the church has had or not had, what it needs to do differently or maybe needs to do more of in the state of play here in America? What's it say?
Well, speaking just for myself, the fact things are getting better, apparently good, but it reminds me of the male-female graphs we talked about, and that the women are getting more and more woke and the guys are getting more and more conservative, but we've unpacked
based,
that.
Maybe.
Well, based.
I'm okay with the term based more than conservative.
But we've unpacked that. And what they're doing, they're rejecting the wokeness. They aren't conservative, and they're certainly not in many respects Christian conservative in a steady, reliable sense. And they're the ones online throwing out, the Jews and all kinds of things. So the fact that they aren't as insane as boomers, that's good, but also, quite frankly, that's a pretty low bar. Even amongst the lowest red bar on the first graph of those who would the amount who would have a gay marriage, it's still way too high for anybody calling themselves a Christian, and that's something we have to reconcile with. We aren't ultimately it's God's standard. It's not just our standard in relation to another generation. It's a cop-out to just, this is a biblical admonition. Don't just say, hey, I'm better than that guy. You're still a sinner, right? So that's what we have to reconcile.
If you don't do that, then we're going to see a chart in 40 years. Well, you guys might not, but I might if I'm still alive.
You're right, we might not. Yes.
Nice. In 40 years.
You'll be dead.
Yes.
We might see a chart in 40 years, Gen Alpha, or 2015 and later, this thing swings right back the other direction as well if you don't heed what Todd is talking about.
How's this tied into the Rubio speech that we talked about in the first hour, do you think?
Yeah.
At the overall state of where the West is at. See, I think it ties in quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the spiritual and moral wherewithal to respond to Rubio's speech in the way we would like exists within those cultures. It doesn't exist. I mean, how come Tommy Robinson keeps getting put in prison in the UK for speaking out against Muslim gang rapes? How many pastors in the UK have been put in prison for this?
I agree, but this, again, very low bar. This is my point.
In fact, how many pastors are there even in the UK?
I don't think American culture is really capable of reconciling itself to Marco Rubio. I think most people in American culture, well, if you ask them about this speech, whether it happened, they'd have no idea.
Well, I said that too.
Because they're largely distracted with all kinds of things and idols and excuses. See, that's the real question. Comparing ourselves to Europe, very, very low bar. What are we prepared to do?
This is why I told you off the air before the show. I think the Hillary Clinton clip that we saw in the montage, where all of a sudden she's calling her 2016 adversary, calling one of his main planks, quote, legitimate, and saying that, quote, migration has gone too far and has been destabilizing. Do you think she really believes that?
No.
Maybe on some level she does, and I think the fact that
she believes that about her house.
She feels like she feels like she needs to say that. That's a pretty good indication that somewhere along the line that argument has been won. However, this goes to what Todd is saying. This is all part of the plan right now. The left-wing plan to let's just moderate the messaging on some issues, even immigration. Trans, we're just going to moderate some messaging so the soft-headed people that Todd just talked about will vote us back into the power one last time.
And they can do that as long as Marco Rubio and Donald Trump are out ahead of the church. And this is proving once again that they are.
I mean, it worked in Virginia.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked in California years ago. You think when Democrats took over California? Saying, hey, here's where this is all going to end up 20 years later, you think that's how they got a hold of what was a reliably red state before that?
Right. And this is why, with all due respect, it doesn't really do any good at the day for evangelicals to say, I'm not one of those main lines. This is the American Christian pot, and it's all why, together, a guy like Donald Trump can be out ahead of the church. That's why we need this whole Protestant Council of Nicaea, my friend.
All right, we'll come back. Joe Mitchell is running for Congress from our home state of Iowa. He's the only Iowan that, before he died, Charlie Kirk ever endorsed for office. And we're going to get a chance to meet and get to know him next.
The Steve Deace Show.
Hey, we're back here on the Steve Deace Show. We want to thank our friends over at Givetti. They were founded by a guy who lost his dad to lung cancer at just 58, despite being a non-smoker, an active guy, healthy guy. But the conventional medical system missed all of those markers. So Givetti came along in order to put those in now and find the things that traditional medicine doesn't care about, like keeping you healthy. They want you to be healthy, not part of a sick care system. They don't want you to manage your sicknesses. That's not their model. That's why they test over 100 labs, things your doctor doesn't even look at: hormones, inflammation levels, metabolic health, nutrient levels, and more. Depending on where you live, they might even be able to come to your house to draw your blood in order to get that information and then empower you with it. It's finally made it on my list today. I mean, the first time I went through my lab results with them, the amount of information they provided to me was so staggering and overwhelming, I got to go through and watch it a second time. All right, so you then, because then they're going to walk you through how to understand it at the exact same time. All right, so if you want to get 20% off and join them right now, you can go to gogivetti.com/Deace and use the code Deace for that discount. That's gogivetti.com/Deace, promo code Deace at gogivetti.com/Deace, promo code Deace for 20% off. We're joined by Joe Mitchell. He's running for Congress here in the state of Iowa in our 2nd district. And he also happens to be, good to see you, Joe.
Good to see you, Steve.
You also happen to be, as far as I know anyway, I think you will remain with his passing, the only Iowan ever endorsed for public office by Charlie Kirk. Watch this.
Hey, everybody. Charlie Kirk here with my great friend, Joe Mitchell, who's running again in Iowa, and he has my complete and total endorsement.
6 years ago, I met Charlie Kirk. He didn't just build a platform, he built a movement. One that believes in faith, in freedom, and in the next generation of American leadership. Charlie told me, don't wait for permission, lead. So I did. We traveled state to state, helping young conservatives find their voice. Not to echo talking points, but to shape the future. This country doesn't change from the sidelines. It changes when people show up, when they run, when they fight, when they believe God has a plan for America. That message lit a fire in me and in thousands of others. Today, that message continues because this isn't just about politics, it's about purpose. Turning Point Action has been leading the charge, and I'm proud to join them. With their endorsement, we're building something bigger than a campaign, a generation ready to lead, ready to serve, and ready to win. Because when the call comes to get in the arena, you answer.
What can I do to save the country? You answer that question every single day. You are doing something that is bigger than you.
Joe, I've got to be honest, I have not, on purpose, I've watched a lot of Charlie clips for the last few months. Kind of been, for tough reasons, bittersweet to watch those, I guess, is maybe the kindest term. But that's quite an honor, man, and very, very well done. So we're pleased to have you here.
Well, I appreciate it. And there's not that many people, Steve, that knew Charlie personally like we did.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's always refreshing, to talk about those memories that we had with him. And this is something I've said on the campaign trail a number of times, but I met Charlie in Des Moines, September 10th, 2019, 6 years ago to the date that he was killed. And I mean, we're both Christians. I think that's something that's divine. I don't know, why, God led him here on that date, to come to a Truth and Freedom conference. And I met him, and, I was a fan of his. I was a state rep at the time, my first year in the legislature. And I went to this event to go get a picture with him because I was like, I love this guy. I listen to his radio show all the time. And I meet him, and he says, we got to talk. We got to talk about your race. How did you win as a 21-year-old in this state? And he sat down with me for 2 hours in that Holiday Inn cafe over by the airport and spoke to me about how can we get more young conservatives to run for office.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, that meant the world to me. And, I didn't realize it was September 10th until, when he got assassinated. That night, I was looking through my phone, and that was the first text I ever had from him. It was Charlie Kirk, 6:52 p.m. on September 10th, 2019. And, he was the last person to see my press release on September 8th. We announced 2 days prior to him being killed. And he was a huge architect in this campaign and was a huge driving force for why I ultimately ended up putting my name on this ballot and running for this office, was because he said we have to have a new generation in Washington. And I believe that.
So let me ask you the question that Charlie did then, back in 2019. How'd you do this at such a young age?
Well, the state house race was because I knocked on doors. I mean, that's why I won the race. I worked harder than anybody else. That's what I started Run Gen Z for, because I told people you can win these school board races, city council, state legislative races if you go out and do the work and if you talk to voters on their doorstep. And it really doesn't take the money to do it, because the districts are so small, especially in Iowa. You can go out and you can win these races just with the shoe leather. And so, that's what we grew as an organization. He gave me the first, money I had for the organization, the seed money for it. He gave me $30,000 in 2020 to start this organization, which I didn't have two nickels to rub together. I didn't have any money. I didn't know how I was going to raise money for it.
And he's
for him to do that means you left quite an impression on him in 2019.
Right. And you got to think about it too. In 2019, you knew Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have that much money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were not the organization then that they are today.
No.
From a resource standpoint. And so that was a huge investment that he made in me and the organization because he believed in the vision of it. And we've grown that now. We've gotten hundreds of young people elected across the country in 40 different states for these different state and local races. And so, you know, again, you know, I would not be in this race right now and not be where I'd gotten to where, you know, I've been in my 28 years without Charlie Kirk.
You know, last night there's been a lot of discussion. TPUSA is dead, right? Its moment has passed. Last night, TPUSA Faith had an event in Nashville. I was invited to be a part of that program, and I've heard a ton of great things about Pastor Alan Jackson down there, and so I was looking forward to going and getting a chance to meeting him. But I had an even higher calling. It was our oldest daughter's birthday,
right?
So I had to not attend.
Right.
And I saw the clips last night of that event, and holy cow, that thing was overwhelming.
Right.
All right, the energy and the attendance. So when you hear people say the TPUSA thing is done, it's going to be buried with Charlie, move on, you know, its moment has passed. I mean, what's your experience now?
I mean, it's completely crazy. I have obviously heard those comments. I get frustrated because I'm like, well, just look at the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
They're far larger now. They're a household name. Again, people my age that have been conservative since we were in high school had known about Turning Point, but the average person didn't, and now they do, and they know what Turning Point does. And you just look at the chapters; they've 10x their chapters from the high school campuses to the college campuses, and that's what Charlie would have wanted, by the way, you know. And I've seen the resources that have came in for this thing. I was down in Florida and Palm Beach for their gala. I think you were as well in December, and they raised,
I sent my guy Adam Steen. I couldn't go, but I sent Adam Steen, my boy, down there.
But they raised like $50 million that weekend.
Yeah, I know.
So anybody that says it's dead, they're a hater. And this is the most frustrating thing for me, knowing the people at Turning Point, knowing Charlie, is the same people hating on the organization now were also the person people secretly hating on it or publicly hating on it before he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all it is. And, people hate the success that he was able to have in his, 31 years on this earth. And they hate the success it has now with him gone. So I think it's only going to grow over the next, number of years. But it is, the single largest driving force of why I think we're going to continue to, hold the House in the midterms from an organizational standpoint. And also from, just re-energizing, young Americans. People are excited about America now. And we're going to have I think we should have an America Club, which is the Turning Point high school chapters on every single high school campus in the state. And you're seeing that happening in Texas and Florida and elsewhere. But I think his legacy is going to last for generations to come because of Turning Point.
Well, let's talk about your race. And it looks like you are going to convincingly win this primary. Who knows? By the time that actually we vote in June, you might be the only candidate.
Right.
You might have cleared the field. So let's skip ahead then to the general election and what you see in the environment right now. What are the biggest challenges? What are some strengths that you think could be capitalized on?
Well, the biggest challenge, Steve, is we have to energize our base. And we talked about that before the show. I think the biggest mistake we make as Republicans is that we think we need to placate to the middle and we forget about our base and the people that brought us there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm not going to forget about our voters, our primary voters, most certainly. I'm running.
That's not to say there's never a time to broaden your message.
Right, 100%.
But you've got to clear that first objective first.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can't, moderate on core issues, and soften your message on things that are going to bring out Republicans to vote. And we've ran on three things in this race. Number one, I'm not taking any corporate PAC money for this election. And I'll be the only Republican when elected to Congress to not take any corporate PAC money, which is unbelievable, by the way.
That is unbelievable.
And that's something from a culture perspective, at some point, I think we need to have, finance reform, but that gets tricky with the Citizens United case, et cetera. But from a, cultural perspective in Congress in D.C., I don't think these people should be taking corporate PAC money. And so we've made that decision from the beginning. And the amount of times I've had people in D.C. and consultants tell me that was stupid, I mean, countless. I mean, because they want you to take the corporate PAC money, because it's a hell of a lot harder to stand up against these publicly traded corporations when you take their money. It just is. I mean, that's human nature. When they give you a $5,000 check from Pfizer or BlackRock or JP Morgan, it's a lot harder to say no to their legislation, what they want. And so I saw that from the beginning. And so I said, we're going to make a pledge. We're not going to take that money. And when we go talk to people, I mean, the Republican voters, most certainly. But when I talk to Democrats, when I talk to independents, they love that. We've gotten so many people sign our signature sheets because we're not taking corporate PAC money. It's a huge hit. And so, that's what it makes me say, well, this was the right thing to do, because people are like, that's what we want from politicians in Washington. We don't want them bought off by special interests. We don't want them taking, the corporate money, because, whether they will admit it or not, it changes how they're going to vote on things. I believe that. I've seen that in the State House. And then the second thing is we have to have term limits. And that's something that, people have talked about for a long time. Not a lot of politicians, though, in the state of Iowa talk about that, And because the elephant in the room is that, Chuck Grassley has been our senator for a very long time. And I tell people, I say, I think Senator Grassley's done a fantastic job. This is not about Senator Grassley. This is about Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. And Grassley is the exception to the rule. And there's far more bad apples that are out there that stay in power for decades and don't let a new generation, take up the mantle. And so this is why we got to have term limits. And the third thing is you have to ban stock trading that happens in Congress. This insider trading that happens is crazy. Hopefully they get Brian Stiles' legislation passed before I'm there, but I'm somewhat doubtful. And you have to have people that press back and say, you can't have people that are addicted to running for office and to power in Washington. And then when they get up there, they make a ton of money, which obviously is influencing their decision on votes. So those three things we've ran on, which, again, it energizes our base, but also your normal voter or your Democrat voter, independent voter, they agree with those 3 points as well.
I think that messaging is frankly brilliant. And the reason why is it sets you up to transcend whatever this election environment is later this year that you will have no control over. You're not in office yet. You're not voting on policies. You're not making those policies. You have no control over the affordability issue and what people think kitchen table wise about the economy.
Yep.
If people think that we haven't deported enough, which is my position, or think we've deported too many, which is other people's position, this sets you up to have signature issues that people do really care about. But none of these are trite issues whatsoever, and it gives you an opportunity to talk to voters aside from an environment that you have no control over.
But if every candidate did that, we'd be super successful in the midterms.
True.
But they won't because, Steve, I had somebody tell me this last week I was excited about coming on your show. So I was like, I watch Steve all the time. I'm super excited about coming on. And they said, why would you go on Steve Deace's show? And I said, well, why not? They said, the primary's over. And I said, this is exactly what's wrong with politicians in Washington is it's like, okay, if I'm in a primary, I'll take advantage of Steve's show. I'll show up to the county GOP Central Committees. Mm-hmm. But if I'm not, I'm going to ignore them all. And it's like, this is why our party is so frustrated with politicians.
So why don't you talk to the Des Moines Register or the Cedar Rapids Gazette instead? Or?
Right, correct. People that hate us. So, this is where...
How many people could you reach that would think for a nanosecond about voting for you by talking to the Des Moines Register or Cedar Rapids Gazette literally ever?
Zero, unless you're an insider.
Yeah.
Zero primary voters at all, by the way, or anybody that's going to be energized about my campaign. And so, but I get the same thing when I go to Washington and talk to these consultants and outside groups when I tell them about the corporate PAC money and the term limits. They say, well, don't worry about that. That shouldn't be a talking point of yours. And I'm like, this is what voters get excited about, because finally there's somebody standing up and saying, we're through with this. We're going to end the corruption. We're going to stand up to the uniparty. And that's what we're doing. And that's why, I believe we've been successful in a race thus far and will be in the general election.
Joe, we're about out of time, man. That was a very impressive presentation. I can see what Charlie saw in you right away. So how can our audience follow your race and support it if they want to?
Of course. So our website, it's pretty easy. It's joemitchell.com. So just my name.com. And we'd love to have your donations. We'd also love to have your vote if you're in the district If you're outside the district, we don't want your vote, right? We're not the Democrat Party. I don't want you mailing in votes outside the district. But no, if you're in the district, in Congressional District 2, which again covers Cedar Rapids, Dubuque, Waterloo, Mason City, all of Northeast Iowa, we would love to have your support in the primary and general election. And joemitchell.com is our website.
All right, that was really good, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
You bet. All right, gents, we got about 30 seconds. Todd, your thoughts sitting here next to Joe for the last 15 minutes. What'd you think?
Well, whether it's the stocks or term limits, or even you mentioned three issues there. PAC money. They're all ultimately the same issue, and it's perfect messaging to come at it from every front, because ultimately, does this country belong to elites, or does it belong to you? And this also, by reminding them, it comes to them. If you want me to fight for this, the deal is the government belongs to you. What are you prepared to do? I love putting that level of ownership on them.
Great stuff. All right, we're going to stick around and record the overtime for Blaze TV subscribers at blazetv.com/Deace. For the rest of you, hopefully we're going to see you tomorrow. Until then, go hard. Romans 8:28.